Hey, so, Mario Kart World. I don't know about y'all, but I'm excited. You know, I really want to see what places like Sarasaland look like culturally. And those character alts, Waluigi, my boy! Speaking of characters, did you all see that totally legit key art from Nintendo Japan's website that was taken offline almost immediately after launch? Okay, if my tone didn't give it away, this is a farce. I drew my OC and edited her into the Mario Kart World key art. Hey friendles, I'm Kendall and I'm going to show you how I edited this key art and fooled one person on Twitter into thinking it was legitimate. Let's get started. Step 1 was to find a reference image of the pose I wanted to draw and roughly place it into the composition, just to see if it'll blend in. Since this is a photo I don't have a license to, I can't show it to you, but it's just some guy on a motorcycle. Once I was satisfied, I did a rough tracing of the bike and the rider's proportions, just enough to get the general silhouette and perspective down. I import my silhouette scribble into a separate document with a copy of the reference image and a previous drawing of my OC on her own vehicle. I call it the Silver Spoon. And now that that's done, it's time to do a sketch and some line art. After some time, I have some line art of my OC, which has been separated into 3 objects and backed with a gray base color. I'll focus on colors later, and as for why I have the body, bike, and goggles separated, I believe it'll be easier to shade my drawing in these separated pieces, especially since I want her eyes to show through her goggles and I didn't want the hassle of rendering eyes through colored lenses. From this point on, I create a clipping mask over the gray base layer, set it to multiply, and go in and shade with the dark gray. Using a soft brush, I focus on giving volume to larger shapes before going into smaller areas for detail and ambient occlusion. I got this specific shading process and many other art tips from Mark Brunnett's YouTube Art School, which I'll link in the description. The main deviation I make in my process is that I use a dark gray instead of a jet black since I find it less intimidating to work with. This process is called volumetric shading, where you go from larger volumes to small details in a single color with a variety of opacities throughout the drawing so it looks more 3D. Despite how well it went through this drawing, I often find myself struggling with volumetric shading, as evident by this drawing I've had sitting in my desktop for like 2 months now. If you find yourself struggling with volumetric shading as well, ambient shading might be helpful, which Mark Brunnett also has a video on. I just use the lasso tool on anything that overlaps and start shading. Just shade larger overlaps before moving on to smaller overlaps. Some people might ask why I didn't just make a 3D model like I always do in ZBrush, and the short answer is I'm a 3D sculptor, not a 3D modeler. While there is overlap between them both, any model I make in ZBrush is far more suited for toys and products than a video game or animation. Even so, I'd have to take my sculpt, retopologize, texture, rig, and render in proper lighting. All of that I have very low-level knowledge of. I do want to one day have the knowledge to make fancy Blender renders, but I'm currently not there yet. I do think the best place to start would be in making 3D rendered stills of the persona I use to represent myself on this channel, and I do intend on making a 3D sculpt of my persona sometime soon. Okay, I told myself if there were any blank slates of footage, I would tell y'all a little bit about my character here. So, yeah, might as well. Her name is Cast a Spell. Full name, Castanuela Espela. And she is this steampunky mage, magic-using adventurer girl I came up with to fill the gap of a female adventurer in the Marioverse. 'Cause, like, Super Mario doesn't have a strictly female adventurer or male royalty, unless you count Bowser or something. Her name is a pun on Cast a Spell. Get it? Cast a spell. And I gave her those classic, like, YA traits, which are considered, like, unappealing, you know, like the tired eyes, hooked nose. And I also made her kind of chubby because she loves food. And all the Mario ladies are really skinny, so I thought that that would help her stand out a bit more. So, like, many years ago, she actually started as a little ghost girl from a dream I had, like, 5 years ago or so. And in this dream, Luigi saved her in a haunted hospital, and then I forgot about this dream for, like, 2 years. But, when I was playing Luigi's Mansion 3 a couple years ago when I was sick, it all just kind of came flooding back to me. And over the course of a few months, I revisited her. She went from being a little girl to being an adult, and she evolved into this mechanical mage from a steampunk Mexican village in the Biribatu region of Sarasaland. Oh, that was a mouthful. So her introduction to the main Mario cast is pretty much the same, being saved by Luigi in a haunted hospital and all that. And she's a ghost when that happens, but she does eventually become human again. See, it's kind of a long, complicated story. I think you guys got the gist of this with all the stuff I was saying earlier, but she's able to see ghosts even when they're invisible. I mean, you could technically already see ghosts in the Luigi's Mansion series, but, like, she can see them when they're invisible. And continuing on, her talents involve mixing magic with machinery. That's kind of her trademark. And that's why she has that little castanet gadget thingy that you see in part of this image. It looks like a compact, kind of like that one from Totally Spies. And it's able to turn into a multitude of objects, which I have drawn in the past a couple of times. Oh, and also she can cook. She really likes food. She really loves food. She can cook. Personality-wise, I would describe her as, like, self-assured, like, really big on justice, like, she has to do the right thing, or she has to correct an injustice, so she can be kind of intense about it. I'd also say she's, like, really friendly, you know, unless you cross her. Oh god, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? And she can speak her mind pretty easily. Unless she has to act on romance. That's when she will stutter really hard. I feel like this might be implied, but she has a huge-ass crush on Luigi, but she doesn't really know how to act on it. But if she's, like, giving dating advice to Waluigi about Daisy or something, that's when it comes super easily to her, and she's suddenly the love guru. Yeah, it'd be like that sometimes, huh? I would say she gets along with pretty much everybody in the main Mario cast except for Wario, because he's mean and he smells. And I do have a thing written where he does something not great to her. Maybe I'll elaborate on this all in comics or something one day, because it's a lot to info dump in a video. She also doesn't have a good relationship with Professor Egad from the Luigi's Mansion series, and that's kind of a spoiler. Yeah, I gotta put this down into comics or something one day. A big crux of her story is that she has this whole journey that leads to her at the end becoming queen of the Ruin Kingdom by defeating the Ruined Dragon, because I wanted her to be a character that isn't royalty or a hero necessarily off the bat. I wanted her to amplify a regular person in the sense of the Mario-verse who goes on to do something great, kind of like what Mario and Luigi did in the movie and the games and everything. Just someone who goes on to do something great. While shading the bike, I found myself struggling to shade the seat spoon, and after stepping back, I had to admit to myself that the ornate spoon handle wasn't working. Instead, I ended up drawing a basic spoon and carried on with shading with the rest of the drawing. With the shading finished, it's now time to color the drawing. I make a clipping mask over the gray base and I just color the respective layers. But in this video, it's as simple as making the layers visible. Since the shading was done in dark gray, the picture looks kinda muddy with such dark shading over those light colors. To remedy this, I select the gray base, inverse the selection, click my shading layer, delete the outside selection, which leaves us with just the shading that fits over the colors without the need for a clipping mask. I duplicate my gray base and colors, merge them together, and move my color copy on top of my shading, and then I set that layer to color, so it makes the shading look less dull and gray. That looks a lot less dull now. Looking over the original Mario Kart splash art again, I try to gauge the ambient colors that seem to be shading everyone. Going back to my drawing, I insert a hue, saturation, and brightness layer style, and then I adjust the settings so my shading matches the color undertones of the original splash art to the best of my ability. Then I just do that for the bike and the goggles. After that, I take the layers of each respective subject and I merge them all together, keeping the body, goggles, and the bike on their own layers. Once merged, I go in and paint over details like mismatched color overlaps and shapes that look a bit off, and also get rid of any visible line art to make it look more 3D. This can be kind of time consuming, especially if you overthink it, but the end result can be really rewarding. I also make sure to erase parts that were overlapping so that my character looks like she's actually riding a bike. Since I want to blend her into the original Mario Kart World key art as seamlessly as possible, I opted to do the lighting in a file with the original key art. The ambient color in my shading was darker and less saturated than the rest of the key art, so I added a clipping mask and set it to hard light to airbrush a light orange color over my subject. Referencing the characters around her, I add highlights, reflected lights, and rim lights on a separated hard light layer. Many of the other characters have orange back rim lighting while having blue highlights, but I also had to keep in mind how fabric and metals would reflect off each other. Once I was satisfied with the lighting, I made a copy and placed her in the spot I envisioned her in, and instead of erasing parts of her to blend her into the composition, I used a black and white alpha channel to mask off some parts so she blends into the background. With a separate layer, I paint on some dust with a cloud brush and lasso out the foreground characters, And that leaves us with the final image. I know with her placement you probably couldn't see my character unless you actively searched for her, but I guess that means I succeeded in blending her in with everyone. I wanted to post the illustration on its own online, but since I did the lighting outside of her original file, I basically had to go back in and add highlights a second time, which ended up leaving us with this final image. The overall process was some much needed practice in illustration, and the techniques to do so are pretty accessible online. As mentioned earlier, I'll be linking the art tutorials I used in the description. Anyways, I'm not in the mood to make a proper outro. Like, subscribe, bye.